I don't like parties anymore. Too many people, too many faces. I've been attending weekly therapy for 6 years, but I am still forced by my subconscious to revisit that night ever so often. It just won't let me forget. The thing is, I'm not sure I want to forget. This will probably mean that I'll be a broken mess until the day that I die, cursed to periodically drown in bottomless depression and anxiety and paranoia. But it'll be worth it. If my story helps just one person, it will all be worth it. Back when I loved parties, dressing up, meeting new people, dancing, drinking, what was not to like? I wouldn't say that I was excessive, but I love to explore new things is what I'm saying. What I'm trying to convey is that I wasn't a stranger to festivities. So while you might sit there going, "Oh, I would have never have done that," or "How couldn't she see how strange that was?" you need to understand that I've been to my fair share of weird and disturbing gatherings. It was a Friday afternoon and I was already somewhat tipsy. I didn't have any specific plans, but I had been invited to 2 different parties, and I was trying to work out which one sounded more promising. The first one was a birthday party. Some guy that I had maybe met twice, a friend of a friend. I knew that there would be free drinks and loud music. Same old boring stuff. And I didn't feel like mindlessly drinking that day. Don't get me wrong, I did partake in the occasional binge fest, but I don't know, I just wasn't feeling it. The other party was strangely intriguing. I had no idea who was throwing it. I was handed an envelope by some guy I passed on my way to school. I lived off campus. He was wearing some sort of grotesque Halloween-y mask, dressed like a businessman from the 19th century or something, and he just gave me the thing. He didn't say a word, just bowed down weirdly, before he skipped on the street like a 5-year-old girl. Truly intriguing. The invitation itself didn't offer much in the way of describing the event. It was a simple note, made to resemble yellowing, fading parchment that simply stated the name and the address of the happening. Colloque of the expired Burgess, taking place at some location on the east side of town. I didn't know the place specifically, but I knew it was in an industrial area, which made the invitation, if possible, even more intriguing. I loved a secret gathering, like some real cloak and dagger type stuff. That was it. There wasn't any question about it. I was going to the colloque, whatever that meant. The invitation didn't say anything about a dress code or when the party had started, but I felt like wearing my red evening gown for some reason. Maybe it was the aesthetic of it all that inspired me, I can't really say, but it felt important somehow. I spent quite some time getting ready, before calling a cab and heading out. I wasn't sure if I was early or late, or if I was required to bring anything, but I felt confident that I could wing it. It wasn't my first rodeo after all. It took the cabbie 30 minutes to locate the address. I was sure that he was ripping me off, but I let it slide. I was feeling, I don't know, excited. Perturbed maybe. There were butterflies or some form of bugs at least, fluttering about in my stomach, that's for sure. I paid the cabbie and I got out of the taxi. I'm not sure what I thought about the place. It was an abandoned factory, rusty and worn. A huge, ugly, industrial eyesore. I guess it sort of fit the whole weird and mysterious theme they were going for, so I can't say I was disappointed. It was just a bit unsettling, I guess. I wandered around the building, trying to figure out where I was supposed to enter. It didn't have an obvious front entrance, more like a bunch of garage-like doors that all appeared locked. I was just about to give up when I heard a loud, metallic clanking just ahead. Someone was opening one of the doors. I sort of jogged over there, afraid that they were going to close it again, but stopped dead in my tracks when I saw the person standing in the doorway. It was the guy who had handed me the invitation. Same clothing, same mask. I hadn't even considered it up until that point. But what if it all was some elaborate scheme to get me alone too well? You know where I'm going with this. He hadn't noticed me yet, so I just stood there in silence, going over all my options. I could run, but I was wearing a freaking evening gown and high heels. There was no way that I could outrun anyone in my current getup. Alternatively, I could sneak away, keep close to the factory walls and make a run for it when I got out of the immediate area. I started slowly moving towards the wall when more people started pouring out of the door. Men and women, all wearing masks. I let out a sigh of relief and smiled. A masquerade ball, how interesting. I hadn't been to many of those, and I felt safer knowing that there were more people attending. So I quietly slipped out of the shadows and walked towards the door. The guy was still standing in the doorway. I guess he was some sort of bouncer or something, so I just showed him my invitation and headed inside. He didn't say a word, just bowed down weirdly. Like I mentioned, I've seen my fair share of weird gatherings, but nothing quite like this one. The vast factory floor had been painted black, with a red circle painted at what I guessed was the center. Candles were the only source of light that I could see, and there had to have been thousands of them. A single table stood in the far end, overflowing with assorted beverages. All in all, it was quite Spartan, but in a good, extremely creepy way. I was impressed. I suppose it was around that time I started noticing the other guests. They were slowly gathering around me, tilting their heads sideways like curious animals. They were all wearing masks. The same mask, well, not exactly. The same mask, but with different variations, I guess. Grotesque, horrible, twisted parodies of the human face. I took a step back, startled. My anxiety finally overshadowing the excitedness. After a moment or two, they started disbanding, each going their own way. I guess it was some sort of welcoming ritual or something. I quickly headed for the beverages. I was starting to lose my buzz, and everything felt so bizarre and otherworldly. I figured I would fare better with just a little bit of alcohol in my system. While I was sipping on some of the stronger stuff, I looked around the place. Where were the masks? Shouldn't I get a mask as well? Who was handing them out? I shrugged it off and just assumed that I would get one sooner or later. Maybe there would be a ceremony for it or something. It's freaking weird, isn't it? A female voice called from behind me. I spat out half a mouthful of brandy in surprise. She was young, around my age, blonde and dressed in a beautiful white and silver gown. I mean, where are our masks? Shouldn't we get masks? That's exactly what I was thinking, I said. I want, nay need, a freaking mask. She laughed and poured me another drink. The other guests were sort of slowly skipping around aimlessly. I never once saw them stop. They weren't even drinking or talking or doing anything but weirdly hopping across the floor. I'm Haley, by the way, she smiled. Jean. I shook her hand awkwardly. Hey, how did you find this place? She waved an envelope around playfully. It looked identical to mine. Some guy gave it to me. He was wearing one of those masks. It's freaking weird, but strangely intriguing, you know? I nodded thoughtfully. Something about this just didn't sit right with me. Even after 5 or 6 drinks, I still couldn't shake the creepy feeling of uneasiness. Haley looked flustered, but fine. So, I guess she must have had a few more drinks than me. Maybe I was just being silly, overcautious. It wasn't like me at all. We stayed put at the table, drinking and talking, having fun. Haley was such a nice girl and we had a lot in common, and she was so easy to talk to. Never an awkward pause. I'm not sure how long it took, a few hours maybe, but at some point we realized we weren't at the table anymore. To this day, I'm still not sure how we got there. I was drunk, sure, but I wasn't blackout drunk, you know. Maybe someone had slipped something in my drink. I doubt it though. I was super cautious about guarding my drinks. I learned my lesson the hard way. We were standing at the center of the red circle, back to back. The other guests were flocking around us at a steady pace, until they surrounded us completely. Grotesque masks everywhere, staring us up and down like puzzled children. I grabbed onto Haley's hand, squeezing it tightly. She did the same to mine. The guests inched closer, stretching their necks towards us weirdly, like prodding vultures. And then it happened. The one single instance that still has me going to therapy, that is still stuck on replay in my mind. They spoke. It wasn't so much the discordant, hushed, gargling voices, though I guess that part was pretty traumatizing too. No, it was their mouths. At first, I didn't catch it. I suppose I was too shocked, but it suddenly dawned on me. Those weren't masks. When they spoke, you could clearly see it. They weren't wearing any mask. That's how they always looked. Their true faces. Deformed, misshapen, utterly repugnant faces. I felt my stomach churning as the realization hit me. And for the first time that night, I truly feared for my life. I can't tell you what they were saying. I don't think the language exists. I've tried to write down all the sounds that I heard, but it's all nonsensical gibberish. I freaked out, I panicked, I completely lost it. I let go of Haley's hand and just ran screaming into the crowd. I don't know what I was expecting, but it certainly wasn't what happened. They let me pass. Not a single one tried to stop me as I made my way to the door. Not a single one pursued me. Not even so much as a head turned as I got the heck out of there. All I heard was Haley's screams. Agonizing, tormented, horrible screams. I will never forgive myself for that. For running. For leaving her behind. Never. I don't know where I ran or for how long, but at some point I was able to flag down a police car. The officers thought that I was hysterical at first, drugged, but somehow I convinced them to come with me, to help my friend, to save Haley. We parked in front of the factory 15 minutes later. It was dark and eerie, and it was dead silent. The officers left me in the car while they went inside to have a look around. I swear, those 2 or 3 minutes that they were gone felt like a lifetime. I was trembling, crying, breaking down. When they came back, they had this annoyed, slightly puzzled expression on their faces. "Miss," one of them said, "there's no one in there. Are you sure this is the right place?" I nodded furiously, tears still streaming down my face. "I don't know what to tell you, miss," he said. "You can go see for yourself." I followed closely behind them. I could still picture those masks, faces vividly, and just the thought of them had me at the very edge of my sanity. We walked through the garage-like door, but suddenly I had to stop. I couldn't believe it. Nothing was the same. I wandered around perplexed. The floor wasn't black anymore. There were no candles, no table, no guests, and no Haley. At this point, I was ready to accept that I must have hallucinated the whole event. that maybe someone had slipped me some shrooms or acid or something. But as it came closer to the center of the floor, I noticed it. I fell to my knees crying. It wasn't a dream. It wasn't a horrible nightmare or some messed up hallucination. It was all real. At the exact center of the factory floor, right where Haley and I stood back to back against those grotesque beings, it was laid out like some sort of a messed up shrine. A beautiful white and silver gown